Thank you very much for the invitation to speak here today. I just want to, before he rushes off, to congratulate the Minister on the enactment of civil partnership legislation. It means a huge deal, it's a huge advance, and will make an enormous difference to many, many people in the ordinary days of their lives. So I just want to congratulate you for getting it through at this time. Thank you. I also want to particularly thank the Equality Authority for the invitation. I think the Equality Authority has been hugely part of the campaign for legal recognition and has played a central role in getting us to this point. So just three things I just want to very briefly talk through. One is just what's in civil partnership, because it has broad implications not just for same-sex couples but also for many non-married cohabitants. The second thing is just to acknowledge and to go over just some of the role that the Equality Authority has played since the early 2000s in advancing change. And finally, just some very brief lessons that may be useful for discussions over the next few days at this conference. So, very quickly, the Civil Partnership Act, or it's the Civil Partnership and Certain Rights of Cohabitants Act, was passed with the support of all parties, without a vote in the Dáil, as the Minister said, and then after quite a nail-biting debate in the Seanad by 48 votes to 4. And it was nail-biting because a series of amendments had been tabled to weaken it and to water down its effects. And they were all rejected, and it was very important that happened. The Civil Partnership and Certain Rights of Cohabitants Act has two separate schemes, and sometimes because the focus has been on same-sex couples, the two schemes get a little bit mixed up. The first is a civil partnership, a registered scheme, where when same-sex couples will register their relationships on using the same procedures as civil marriage, and from that registration will derive many of the same rights, but also legally enforced obligations of civil marriage. And they cover a wide range of issues, from taxation through to immigration, to protection of the shared home. The second is the cohabitation scheme, and this applies to all unmarried, both opposite sex and same-sex couples who do not marry or do not register their relationships. A qualified cohabitant, or people qualified to be a cohabitant after 5 years living together and 2 years if they have children. And from that, this is a presumptive scheme, and from that the economically dependent partner can apply to the court for a series of remedies. And this could have huge implications maybe on the gender ground, because very often it is women who are economically dependent because they are looking after children, and this may provide much needed remedies. There also has been a significant expansion of the equality legislation. There is now the new ground of civil status that includes marital status, but also makes it an offence to discriminate against civil partners on whether in employment or in the provision of goods and services. Just because this session is about the Employment Equality Act, some sense of the impact of civil partnership you can see if we look at employment. Registered civil partners will be treated the same for pensions as married spouses. Under the Employment Equality Act, the new civil status ground will make it illegal, as I said, to discriminate against civil partners in employment, and any workplace benefit that is offered to a spouse must also now be offered to a civil partner. Equally, the definition of member of the family in the Employment Equality Act has been extended, so any benefit offered to the child of a spouse must also be offered to the child of a civil partner. And income tax is going to be amended to, again, deliver equal treatment with married spouses. And this means, again, people in vulnerable situations, that you can transfer your tax credits to the person who is earning less in the relationship, and that will mean a lot for a lot of people. And immigration has been, the immigration bill will be amended to deliver equality with married couples, but already civil partnership, the act being enacted, has led to changes in de facto recognition in immigration regulations, and that has been a huge thing because a huge amount of calls to GLEN over the past 5 years have been from couples where one party is from outside the EU and they're trying to stay and live here in Ireland on the basis of their relationship. They now have some protection now under de facto recognition as a result of the bill coming through. I think one thing to acknowledge as well is that I met somebody from New York recently who was over, and he was quite astonished, a gay man, looking at legislatively where Ireland was compared to New York, the sheer amount of progress that has happened here. And as you can see, right from '93 on, from unfair dismissals right through to decriminalisation in '93, the Refugee Act '96, we have had just a very, very significant progress of protections for lesbian and gay people that have propelled Ireland into one of the top countries in the world around protection for lesbian and gay people. And the Civil Partnership Act is a huge, very serious step forward on that. And in a way, it's the other legislation was about the right not to be fired, the right not to be refused the service. This is the first bill that really, first act that really looks at the right to something, and it is the rights of couples to have their relationships recognised, to have those relationships acknowledged by the state and by their communities. As I said, I think the Equality Authority has been a very central player in a great deal of this progress. Going back to 2002, as Angela said, the Equality Authority was the first body to come out for civil marriage for same-sex couples, and that was quite a long time ago. And since then, it has played a very central role. The previous CEO, Neil Crowley, and Eilish Barry, the legal officer at that time, played a very significant role in participation on the Collie Group, and then also leading a major international conference in 2006, which really defined the issues and really, I think, made a major contribution to clarifying the issues to the Irish public. And from that, Collie was able to make its proposals, as I said, which clarified the issues that same-sex couples in particular were looking for marriage. Previously, what had been offered to same-sex couples was a very, very limited partnership model that would have been open to anyone. The Collie Group changed that, and the Equality Authority played a very significant role in that. But equally, under Angela Cairns and Rini Dempsey, the Authority has continued to play a very, very substantial role. The Authority came out in favour of the Civil Partnership Bill when it was published, but they didn't lose sight of the goal of marriage, which is the goal of GLEN, and equally made very, very strong statements. Angela Cairns, in an op-ed piece in the Irish Times, very strong statements on the opt-outs that had been put forward by religious groups in the legislation, which would have hugely weakened its effects. And that played a very, very strong role in making sure that those opt-outs weren't taken. So I think this progress, that input really needs to be acknowledged. And equally, the Authority has continued to acknowledge a key gap in the legislation, which is lack of any recognition of children being parented by same-sex couples. The Authority has, as we have, made a very substantial submission to the Law Reform Commission, which is examining these issues currently. Just very quickly and lastly, just to look at some of the emerging lessons of the work that has taken place over the past 2 decades to advance all of this progress. From our own experience and working with the Equality Authority and with the other equality infrastructure, including our work with the Department of Justice and Law Reform. The first one is building institutional support. That has been critical. As I said, the role of the authority and the Colley Working Group have been central in framing the debate, in clarifying the issues around legal recognition. The second one, and more importantly even, has been building political consensus for change. And I think we are very pleased that not only has the legislation been passed with the support of all parties, but I think there's a real sense of ownership among all politicians and the Oireachtas of the legislation. Every party can see the role they've played, from the Labour Party, which had tabled its civil unions bill twice in 2007, to the Green Party, which has a policy of supporting marriage, and right through to Fine Gael, which was one of the first parties to propose civil partnership legislation. And so I think the Oireachtas and members of the Oireachtas need to be congratulated. The quality of the debates was really superb, and we've published, GLEN has published the Seanad and Dáil debates on that basis, because the quality of the input from all parties was very, very significant. And also what's evident from the debates is there seems to be an appetite for further progress. The issues and the gaps around children have been emphasised by politicians across all parties, and we're hoping now that as a result of Law Reform Commission's proposals, we can move legislatively on further progress, and the support of the authority has been and always will be very welcome in that respect. I suppose the third point is that it is still possible to make progress at a time of huge economic crisis. I think that is a hopeful point around what has happened. Even despite the worst economic crisis of a generation, this progress still has been made. And we hope, as the Minister has said, I thought it was an interesting point to say, is that equality isn't some frippery, it's not some kind of luxury of the boom. It's actually an intrinsic part of our capacity to recover as an economy, and economics and social development do go hand in hand. So the equality infrastructure in that sense can be considered as part of our economic infrastructure. The two are very linked. Another point, I suppose, from me has been the critical importance of delivering change in people's lives. It's 5 years ago, people rang me when I started this job in GLEN. They had immigration cases, they had a whole range of issues that affected them, and we had literally nothing to offer them. And in some cases, people had to leave the country, their relationship ended, or they had to both emigrate. In other cases, a business might have had to be sold because of the death of a partner, and their livelihood gone as a result. For some people, it's too late. The partner has died, and even in some cases, they don't want anything but retrospective recognition. So I think that the need and urgency of this legislation has been very apparent from that. But I think we always have to keep a critical mind when we're, I suppose, framing the eventual goal of what we want to achieve. We also have to bear in mind that progress along that goal is extremely important for people in their lives. And I suppose the last thing is just to finish on is, I put it as unanimity in the goal and differences in strategy. Certainly there has been there has been unanimity among lesbian and gay groups that marriage is our goal. Sometimes that hasn't often been apparent, because there have been very significant differences in strategy. And I think we need to be able to look, I think rationally, given we're talking over the next 2 days about the equality agenda, I think we need to be able to reflect on what strategies do work, rather than going back to re-articulate our goals. I think it is very useful to think, well, how do we achieve that? What are the lessons we learned along the way, and how can we continue to move as fast to the goal as we possibly can? I'll just finish on that, and as I said, I'm delighted to be here today, and I just want to again pay tribute to the Equality Authority for their significant work, past and present, on this issue. Thank you very much.